But Honduras, so as you know, has always been the most obedient server of the United States in the region. And we're talking about since the 20s, 30s, 40s. We were called the Banana Republic in the 40s. And then in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we had in Honduras one of the U.S. biggest military bases in the whole world that is called Palmerola, that has permanent troops from the Marines and Special Forces and the U.S. Air Force. It's one of the biggest operations that they have that's called Tango Bravo, that is for surveillance in what's going on in the region and in the Caribbean. Honduras was used in the 70s and in the 80s to attack the popular movements of El Salvador, of Guatemala, of Nicaragua. Many of the torture manuals that were found in Guantanamo were proved to be had made years before in Palmerola, in Tegucigalpa, with the U.S. military base and our ambassador, or your ambassador in our country. We did everything that they said, everything. We privatized everything. We gave away everything. We sold everything. Our government was so destroyed, so small, that it didn't control nothing at all. By 2000, the United Nations tells us that we have become the second most poor country in the continent, only after Haiti. And something told us that there was something bad about that formula that we were following, so obedient. Then we had the Hurricane Mitch in 1998, and that was it. It was like the country was destroyed. And in 2000, something new happened in Honduras. There was this movement of some unions that were willing to have a popular movement, some students, some campesinos, some organization, political organization that had survived the 90s, and we started to get together, and a word was said again in Honduras after almost 14 years of silence. That was that we had become again anti-imperialistic, and we were willing to be anti-neoliberal, and we were fighting against CAFTA, that was the Central American Fair Trade Area. So we got together. We called everyone to be part of a demonstration on August 26th of 2003. And there we had in Tegucigalpa around 25,000 people, and it was incredible. It was, I had never seen so many people together that was not in the National Stadium at the same place at the same time. So we went there, we had a lot of pressure, and we stopped the privatization of water. But we fought against Zelaya when he got to the presidency because he was part of one of the two conservative parties. In Honduras, we have two conservative parties. We have the Liberal Party that has 120 years old, and we have the National Party that has 100 years old. They're the same thing. They just have two different flags. They just change power one hand to the other, and the only time that they didn't have the control of Honduras was when the military regimes were created in the 60s and in the 70s. But they have always had the control. So he was a liberal. We didn't expect nothing from him. What changed with Zelaya? So Zelaya stopped that, and the oligarchy didn't like it. Then he stopped the privatizing of the telephone company, and of course they didn't like that. And then he stopped the privatizing of the electricity company, and that's when they started calling him a communist. What Zelaya was doing was to get some money to do some things because he was a president for no one. He couldn't do nothing. So he stopped the privatizing. He started getting some money there. We also have to remember that after they signed CAFTA, the Honduran government stopped receiving taxes from its borders, from commerce. So there was no money where the government could get something to do things. So he stopped that. They start calling him a communist. And then he had his second big problem. He had promised that the prices of gasoline and diesel and oil products products will be lower. We were paying in 2008, we were paying around $4 per gallon of gasoline. And you're talking about that the people in Honduras, the minimum salary was up to $245 a month. That's for the people that had work, because 40% of the people in Honduras were unemployed. So paying $4 was impossible. So people were in the streets again against Zelaya, demanding that he had promised that prices were going to be low. First, he had taken out the power of Che Texaco and eso. And now he was talking with Chavez. Then that's when he loses his friendship in the U.S. Embassy. And a new campaign starts with Zelaya. And the oligarchy was calling him, he was a murderer, he was a criminal, he was a drug dealer, he was this, he was that. And it's very interesting because people in Honduras that didn't like Zelaya started liking him because of the violent attacks from the oligarchy. So it was a very logical thing. It's like, if these guys are attacking him, there has to be something good about him. So people start like seeing Zelaya in a different way. At that point, I'm talking about the end of 2008, Zelaya has against him the U.S. Embassy, and for that reason, he has against the Supreme Court, he has against the National Congress, the General Attorney, the police, and the military. He has a meeting with the popular movement, and he tells us, I can't trust the police and I can't trust the military. That's it. There's no way in Honduras to do something. And the only way, and this is after Zelaya signs ALBA, that is the Bolivarian Alternative for Americas, that is a kind of free trade area without commerce being like the main thing. It's more of in changings of benefits like medicine, or in the case of Honduras, they were asking milk, and we were going to receive pharmaceuticals and doctors and this and that. Zelaya had ALBA when he had CAFTA at the same time. And his argument was that a president of a country that supposedly is a free country could decide with whom he or she wants to have international relationships and with whom not. So he had a relationship with ALBA and CAFTA at the same time. The thing is that when Zelaya proposes to create a new constitution, he knows he doesn't have the strength to do it in his government. So it was ridiculous for us to see the attacks that came from the oligarchy in Honduras and the oligarchy in all the region that said that Zelaya was trying to become a dictator. You don't become a dictator when you have against you the police, the military, the Supreme Court, the National Congress. What kind of dictator is that? It was absurd to say that. Do you want a new constitution, yes or no? If yes had more votes, then the president that was going to be elected that day had the compromise to work in a new constitution for his 4-year period that will begin in January of 2010. So that was it. That was the big crime that he was planning against the democracy in Honduras. The day of June 28, 2009, the Organization of American States had sent to Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras, around 120 international observers to see the process of the national consult. And we have journalists from all over the world. So that day, the military forces get in Zelaya's house, shoot all over the place, take him, put him on a plane, send him, and this is thanks to WikiLeaks that we know this, he lands in the military base of the United States in Palmerola. So if you have so much Marines and you have so much special forces and you have so much gunpowder in a U.S. military base, it was just a simple order to stop the president of a country being kidnapped. But they didn't do it. They put them more fuel and take him to Costa Rica. At the same moment, Zelaya is saying in Costa Rica that he has just been kidnapped. The National Congress of Honduras is reading a letter in which they say that he has resigned because he doesn't feel well. And people went to the streets. And the three main forces that were in the streets that day were the popular movement, the people of the Liberal Party that felt betrayed because their historical leaders had betrayed one of their own, and now they call themselves liberals and resistance. And many other groups of the social movement, especially from around NGOs and people that have worked, that now working so close to the popular movement, but were working in social things that, by the way, didn't like Zelaya, were in the streets that day. In that day, we started to call ourselves the National Front Against the Coup d'etat, Frente Nacional contra el Golpe de Estado. That was our first name. So we started getting people in the streets. On July 5th, Zelaya announced that he's going to come back in a plane to Tegucigalpa. And more than 500,000 people are on the streets that come all around the country to go and get him to the airport. And that day, one of the worst days that many of us had in our life, was also the day that we woke up, and the people of Honduras woke up and realized that we had been so naive and so innocent. We had never had a democracy. We had never had a state of law. We had never been free. The oligarchy has never been willing to share the benefits that it has with the population. And the military had never been our friends. They have always been our enemies. And the State Department didn't care about what's going on in Honduras. And the United Nations also didn't care. So that was the beginning of the resistance. The next day, the three groups that were in at the first day of the coup had become a minority. The Popular Movement of Honduras, the Liberals and Resistance, and this group of social movements, we were a minority. There were hundreds and thousands of people in the streets. And those people had never had a political participation before June 28 of 2009. They never cared. But that day, things changed in Honduras. People really did believe that we live in a democracy. People thought that if we showed that we were more people in the streets, they were going to let Zelaya get out of the airport, and we were going to take him to the presidential house because we voted 4 years for him, not 3.5 years. In November of 2009, the United States sponsored an election in which nobody participated because we were in a coup. We were militaries guarding the ballots. We didn't have a candidate. We didn't care for it. The candidates that were close to the resistance resigned. They didn't participate in that process. And nobody was in the streets. But CNN said that in 2009, the biggest participation in elections in Latin America was the one held in Honduras. And when we saw the footage, they had videos from El Salvador. And they were like, okay, this is how it's going to be? Great. There's no problem. We don't care. So that day, we changed our name. And we stopped being the National Front Against the Coup d'etat and began to be the National Front of Popular Resistance. Because we knew that our struggle went beyond putting Zelaya back in the presidency. That our struggle was even beyond getting the murderers in jail. We were in a process that will take a long time, but our main goal was to refound or the refoundation of Honduras. The United States State Department says that when Lobo got to power, that was it. The coup was over. Everybody had to go to their houses, and that was it. Of course, the resistance didn't do it. And we keep on working together. And the thing with the resistance is that it's so strong that we have, for example, the queer movement, the gay movement, the LGBT community, working side by side with the evangelic leaders in resistance. We have the feminist movement working with the machista historical union leaders, working side by side. We have the campesino working with the student. We have everyone that we thought before we had big difference. We have understand that those differences are insignificant compared with the difference that we have with the enemy. That has always been the same enemy, is the oligarchy that has always worked for the State Department, the military that work for the oligarchy and are trained by the US Army. All of the leaders of the coup in the military forces are graduates of the School of the Americas, all of them. So you can see that there's a direct relationship between our historical enemy and a politic that goes all around Latin America that is trying to militarize everything again. So we got to June 2010, the first anniversary of the coup. We have been in the streets 12 months, and we were in the streets one more month. We were 13 months in the streets. And you're talking about all the territory of Honduras had struggles. So we made a decision. That struggle was going to be a long-term one. We had to create a structure that was strong enough to face our enemy. So we stopped being so much in the streets and we start going around the territory, creating assemblies. In Honduras, we have 18 departments. Those departments have, in all of them together, a total of 298 municipalities. The resistance had an assembly in each one of those municipalities, and we created a structure of the resistance in each one of them. So for the first time in Honduras, we had a political force with a structure in all the territory. Not even the conservative parties had never had it, because there are parts of Honduras that just don't care for it. But we had that. Then we start to organize the neighborhoods, the barrios, because it was a different struggle. And we start putting people together, and the most dangerous, poor, populous barrios in our main cities had now an assembly of the resistance. And we have the sectors. We have the teachers, the unions, the feminists, the students, the political organization. Everyone had a delegate for the assembly. And it was a 6-month process until we had our assembly on February 26 and 27. We had 1,800 delegates from all over Honduras. And we also had something that we call the 19th Department. That is of all the Honduran people that live outside Honduras that are organizing the resistance. And we're starting to organize them, we're still in that process right now. In the United States, we have 12 delegates. We had 2 from Canada. We have 3 from Spain. We have groups organized in France, in Switzerland, in Germany, in Brazil, in Argentina. We have one in Australia, for impossible that could sound. We have cameraman from the only TV station that is not with the regime being beaten up. We have a lot of repression against journalists. That is one of the main symptoms when you have something that is not so democratic. You beat up the journalists. Honduras became in 2010 the 3rd dangerous country in the world to be a journalist, only after Mexico and Pakistan. So that's what's going on with the journalists. We had around 200 people that have been killed during or around demonstrations in Honduras. People that had just gone out that curiously were killed to rob their cell phone, or people that have been killed when they were going to a demonstration, or people that were killed with witness all around seeing them being killed in a demonstration, and nothing was said. They have stolen from the Teachers Bank, from the cooperatives, from the workers' savings, around 20,000 million lempiras, that is $1,000 million. And everybody knows who stole them, and nobody's prosecuted for that. You could feel that there was something wrong in the reconciliation and unity government. But they still back it up. So we made the assembly. They, as I said, they killed a lot of people. They tried to pay a lot of people. They couldn't stop it. We had an assembly on February 26 and 27, as I said, of 1,800 delegates from all around our territory and representing all around the sectors that made the social movement in our country. And we had 3 agreements. The first agreement is that we don't recognize law. We don't recognize the Supreme Court. We don't recognize the National Congress. We don't recognize the General Attorney. We don't recognize the police, and we don't recognize the military. For the resistance, we don't have a government. So you can't dialogue with something that you don't believe in. Second, they told us if we would be willing to participate in the elections of 2014. And we said that we will, but only if all the exiles are back in Honduras. We're talking about over 200 people, including Zelaya. If all the money that they have stolen is back in the people's hands, and if all the golpistas, all those criminals, and the ones that gave the order to kill people are in prison and prosecuted. When we have these three simple things, then we will participate in an election. And the third one is that on June 28th of this year, our second anniversary of the coup, we're going to start a process to use those assemblies that we made for our General Assembly all around the territory to build together a new constitution. So we're going to have this June 28th, our National Assembly, to decide what are the bases of that new constitution. And we're talking about really, really radical ideas like women and men are the same. These revolutionary things like, for example, your sexual preference doesn't matter in your life as a citizen. Or even dangerous is that if you have an electricity bill or a water bill, you have to pay it. Because the oligarchy of Honduras has over 30 years without paying their electricity bill, their water bill, their telephone bill. They don't pay nothing. So now they have to pay. It doesn't matter what your last name is. It doesn't matter how much money you have to pay because there's no privilege, people, or they shouldn't be. We said that we had to prove that people wanted a new constitution. So we put as a goal that in 3 months we will get 1 million signatures from citizens that say that they wanted a new constitution. And in 3 months, we got 1,350,000 signatures. And thank you. And I'm talking about that we have 7 million people in Honduras. That's our population. Half of them are under 18 years old. So only 3.5 can vote. And of those 3.5, we got 1,350,000. And you're talking about people that put their complete name, their identification number, and their signature under a regime so violent as the one we have. What did they do? March was the most violent month since the coup. And the reason was that they attacked the resistance for two things. First, they didn't have so much attention as they had at the first days of the coup. The international media was more concentrated, of course, in Egypt and the Middle East. So there was no cameras on them. And second, they had to destroy the resistance. So they attacked the two strongest groups that represent the street struggle. There are the teachers movement and the student movement. The thing with the teachers was that the money that they have been saving for their pension had been stolen by the regime. And it's really hard for me to say this, but the sister of Zenaida was a teacher that was fighting for her rights and was killed because a police shot less than 2 meters away a tear gas bomb to her face. We have 8 high schools that were kept guard by their students to stop the military to get inside and take them out. One of those colleges, 3 15-year-old students were found dead, shot after a demonstration. That same day, 3 compañeros were found dead 1 week after Irse, which I had the opportunity to meet before because she let us use the gymnasium of the Escuela Argentina because we had this popular theater group going on, so we practiced there. A week later, when those 3 kids are found dead, Hillary Clinton is congratulating Lobo in Washington for his advances in the human rights. The resistance is in the streets, and we're not taking a step back. We are a Pacific movement. In each demonstration, the smallest one, the smallest demonstration that you can ever see of the resistance, we are 10 to 1 against a policeman. And we are 10 to 1 against a military man. And in almost 2 years of struggle in the streets, there has been no police and no military killed in Honduras. On the other hand, you have more than 200 people killed during demonstrations. So you can see where violence is coming from. Why do you think, or why do anyone can think, that militaries in Latin America had so much power to overthrow democratic governments and stay? They had that power because they had the United States backing up. And the US Army is spending each year more money to attack, to control Latin America. There is no turning back in Honduras. The history of our country, nothing lasted more than 3 months. No popular movement lasted more than 3 months. We are over our second anniversary, and the resistance is getting even bigger. Is that they're going to build these industrial corridors to give a solution very similar to the same one that they give to Haiti, is to build hundreds of sweatshops where the people can work. So you have to be put a much of attention in Honduras open for business, because this is part of the strategy. You take out a government, you put criminals, then you pay for those criminals, and then you put on sale a country. The other thing is that in June in El Salvador, we have the General Assembly of the Organization of American States, OAS, and the State Department is pressing that Lobo Sosa is recognized again by the OAS. They took Honduras out after the coup. If they do that, what they're going to say is that the message is that it's okay what's going on in Honduras, that Lobo is a democratic government, and that's not true. But Honduras, so as you know, has always been the most obedient server of the United States in the region. And we're talking about since the 20s, 30s, 40s. We were called the Banana Republic in the 40s. And then everything. We privatized everything. We gave away everything. We sold everything. Our government was so destroyed and so small that it didn't control nothing at all. By 2000, the United Nations tells us that we have become the second most poor country in the continent, only after Haiti. And something told us that there was something bad about that formula that we were following, so obedient. Then we had the Hurricane Mitch in 1990 of Nicaragua. Many of the torture manuals that were found in Guantanamo were proved to be had made years before in Palmerola, in Tegucigalpa, with the U.S. military base and our ambassador, or your ambassador in our country. We did everything that they said. And that was it. It was like the country was destroyed. And in 2000, something new happened in Honduras. There was this movement of some unions that were willing to have a popular movement, some students, some campesinos, some political organization that had survived the 90s. And we started to get together, and a word was said again in Honduras after almost 14 years of silence. That we had become again anti. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, we had in Honduras one of the U.S. biggest military bases in the whole world, that is called Palmerola, that has permanent troops from the Marines and Special Forces and the U.S. Air Force. It's one of the biggest operations that they have, that's called Tango Bravo, that is for surveillance in what's going on in the region and in the Caribbean. Honduras was used in the 70s and in the 80s to attack the popular movements of El Salvador, of